Chair.
Call Ian Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. Throughout the debate this evening, the members on the government benches have been throwing around a few labels, and I think Part 4 gives us an opportunity to perhaps introduce a few labels for this government. Undemocratic. There's a label that sits very comfortably on this government. Thoroughly undemocratic. Dividers is another one that sits very comfortably on this government. Arrogant is a third that I think sits very comfortably, and it's all here in Part 4 of this bill. Undemocratic, in that they set up perfectly good processes in law, in other parts of this bill, perfectly good processes for dealing with applications. They set up an authority which can hear representations, can hear all sides of the story, has more than one member so that they can offer different views and advice to one another. It sets that democratic, robust system and authority up, and then in Part 4 completely undermines the whole thing and vests all the authority in one person. The minister, a minister, probably either the Minister for the Rugby World Cup or the Minister of Economic Development, who is himself the current Minister of Economic Development, well versed in undemocratic processes. Jackie Dean tried to say that actually it was more democratic to vest all this authority in one elected representative as opposed to a group of appointed officials. Well, in that case, why don't we just do away with the judiciary? Why don't we just do away with courts and judges and the judicial process and natural justice and the rule of law? We'll get rid of all of those things and we will rely on vesting all power in a single, albeit elected person. I think they call that a dictatorship. That obviously is where the government would like us to go, and if we have more examples of what we have here in Part 4, then that sort of undemocratic process is where we're going to end up. The second label that sits comfortably on this government is dividers. They have been incredibly divisive throughout this debate tonight. They have sought to label the opposition, and they have bizarrely not been prepared to even countenance the Honourable Trevor Mallard's one amendment to this Part 4. It is there are numerous clauses in Part 4. There are a huge number of clauses in here. The Honourable Trevor Mallard wants to amend one, or wants to make one addition that puts a small handbrake on the minister's power. It is an opportunity for consensus. It is an offer of a compromise position. I think it's a very mature response from the opposition benches, and yet the government just absolutely refuses to engage in an intellectual debate. They refuse to actually tell us why they are opposed to that amendment offered up by the Honourable Trevor Mallard. They refuse to tell us why they have so much confidence in Part 4 as it is written at the moment without making that amendment. They simply sit there and hurl abuse at the opposition for trying to offer an option that we could come to compromise on, that we could build consensus around, and we could move on, as the government wants us to do. We could move on with this legislation right now, if they would just actually get down off their high horses, drop the arrogance for a second, and countenance the idea that the opposition can put up a good idea and can actually can make an offering to this bill that is useful. It is just one clause. Jackie Dean asked, why no minority report? Well, putting to one side the fact that the member sitting next to Jackie Dean doesn't actually take kindly to minority reports and likes to trample on democracy and votes them down, put that to one side, that there probably wasn't even a point in putting up a minority report on Part 4. This is one singular clause. What is the point of having an entire minority report for one amendment to one clause that can simply and efficiently be dealt with in this supplementary order paper as we have offered up this evening? That would be the mature response from this government. But instead we've had childish insults hurled across the House tonight in an effort to try and paint the opposition, who are simply saying this is vesting too much power in one individual. arrogance, Mr Chair. Mr Chair?
Ian
Mr. Chair?
Lees-Galloway.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It is pure arrogance that the government is not prepared to actually look at the amendment that Mr Mallard has offered up, because we may as well actually cut almost every other provision in this bill. We can probably get rid of Part 3 altogether. There's most of Part 2 that could go altogether, and frankly, actually, Part 5 could just about be cut out altogether, and we would just have, if we left Part 1 as it was. Part 4. Part 4. Mr Mallard is looking at me oddly. If we left Part 4 as it was, because that basically overrides everything else that's in there. Good processes, good solid processes, which have been included in the bill. Yes, I was getting it. Yeah. So, good processes which are in the bill, thoroughly and completely undermined by Part 4, and it could be so easily fixed. It could be easily fixed. We could finish this debate tonight if the government could actually just get down off their high horse for a second and deal with it. But no, that's right. Steve Chadwick is absolutely right. They've decided to dig in, and they've decided to take the difficult option rather than seeing sense and just working with the opposition for once. Mr Chair, the Part 4 is in dire need of amendment, and the option is still available for the government to see sense and join with the opposition in actually reaching a consensus position. Of course, I suppose it's not really of any particular great surprise that they have taken the undemocratic approach. We've seen it down in Canterbury with Environment Canterbury. We've seen that there is some question mark over the powers that have been vested in the government following the earthquake. That was an emergency situation, and we voted in favour of it because it was an emergency situation, but there is certainly some question marks around it. But again, what actually did happen with the Canterbury legislation is the government did engage to a certain extent, and we were able to reach a position where there was some handbrake on that unbridled power. Why not do the same this evening? I asked that of the Minister and the Chair. We haven't had a single call taken from any of the ministers occupying the chair this evening. What is the reason for not engaging with the opposition on this amendment? That is the question that lies before the Minister and the Chair and any member of the government benches who wants to take up that challenge, because they have not been able to articulate it in any meaningful way whatsoever this evening, why it is that they are so opposed to a mature and sensible amendment that would simply modify the legislation in a way that would make New Zealanders comfortable with it, that would make the opposition comfortable with it, and that we could actually get some progress on this bill. Chairman.